All right. Welcome to the November 8th UX Sync. If you're in the US and you watch this today, go vote. Plug. And then otherwise, first item up is I just wanted to open this because I know, Annabelle, you and I have like pinged a little bit about it. We've been on a few issues. I feel like we're getting to a point where I'm a little concerned about like all of the different things that are happening in the merge or that groups are proposing or that are changing in the merge request around like the way the flow works today and potential future states that could exist. One of those is like the new security approvals, which are approvals that are like also dependent on pipelines existing, which is like different than the way all other approvals work. And I think that's a complication that has not been thought of in like terms of how does that flow work with everything else in the merge request? Like how does that work with merge trains or merge when pipeline succeeds and all those things? And then on the compliance side, like out of that group, they're also working on external status checks, which similarly can control mergeability based on delayed events. So like they pull out to third-party APIs and then look for like pass-fail status on third-party APIs. So in theory, you could have like an external status check, complicated way to do this, that like talks to another CI system that has to go and run pipelines and waits for that to finish before that external status check comes back and tells you whether or not something is like pass or fail. And that controls whether or not you can click the merge button. So like, who knows, those things could take from seconds, like pinging a system API response milliseconds, to infinite. And like, what is that state in between? And so from my side, like, I just want to make sure that we're aware. And then two, like, how do we, I think Annabelle's sort of like, how do we best get a handle back on these things? Because I'm worried what'll end up is like the merge, there'll be like even more states that a merge request could be in before you could merge or approve than like what we know of today as each of these increases. And like, how do we make sure that that experience is sort of consistent across all of the different things that these groups are trying to accomplish without harming probably like the core, what I would say is the core persona of developers who are like trying to like move through these things efficiently. And I did not link to things. I should do that. So you have the context of all these discussions, but I will do that.
Which one are you going to link to? There's like 7 different issues.
I'll link to the parent secure one, and then people can choose your own adventure through them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't looked at any recent updates from today. I don't have a solution. I'm wondering. Okay, so we briefly talked about this before you joined. Amy said, "What about a setting?" And I said, "I suggested that." Now, the prevent approval before pipeline is finished, that could, I mean, you already wrote it right here, automatically merging when ready, auto merge, including pipelines and all checks, would technically solve everything in a way, wouldn't it? Any external CI services would need to succeed. Your security approvals would need to wait on the pipeline. That wouldn't solve that, actually, would it? Because you need the security approvals to approve after the pipeline's finished, right?
Yeah.
Is it not enough to just tell the security people who are using GitLab to wait for the pipeline to finish?
I don't know. I think more generally, I think maybe my ask is like, should we, this is like a balancing act. You and Ben are in the middle of like this large restructuring effort, which is sort of important for our group in terms of like moving the usability of the merge request forward. At the same time, there's this other competing thing happening. But do we need to sort of like step up and I don't want to pause the restructuring thing, but maybe we have space in the restructuring to also sort of come back, look at all of this and say, yes or no, we need to spend more time sort of researching all of these areas holistically to make sure we're developing one solution for this, or do we think we can sort of take these on in real time, diagnosing like as MRs come up, which is the case with like the compliance one, right? Like the compliance one is in flight, and so if we want to do something, we've sort of got to be rapid, I would say, in our response. But I think like I'd say that's maybe the more. I don't necessarily want a solution on all the things in the secure one because I think it's there's a lot going on and it's very hard to follow for me. But should we try and like spend more time on this, or do we want to? I mean, our other option would be like address it in post, let them go how they want to go on this, and then get things shipped into the product, and then sort of have to go back and deal with whatever the fallout is.
Well, when you say it like that, it doesn't sound very good, but I haven't actually seen the final proposal from them yet. And like ideally, it would continue to be this sort of way where they're driving everything and then pinging us for just checking and advice and that kind of stuff, or making sure that it's still going to work the way that they're expecting it to, which is what I would rather do. I just don't. I find it really hard to follow too, and I'm wondering if we need to talk with them as well, just because I don't know anymore what the proposal is. There are three different problems, and then there's this overarching theme. And everyone, like we've got 10 people contributing on this, and I'm not sure what's happening anymore. So in a perfect world, I guess it would be continuing to be on their responsibility to keep on suggesting proposals. I don't know if they have the problem in the solution validated or decided on, but that would also fall under them. And then we would just be what's the word I'm looking for? They'd be the DRI. We'd be I've seen this before in GitLab. Like we would be informed, is it, or whatever.
Consulted.
So that's
probably.
consulted. That's the one. Because I don't really think we should drop what we're doing right now to pick this up.
Ben, you had a question. I don't know if you want to ask yours.
Do we know if they've done any research for any of these proposals? Or like, where are these coming from? Are they user requests? Are they, what's the driver?
I think it came from a customer, right? Was it like the original issue said that one of the customers did approve that merge request and then some vulnerabilities were reported after approval? Is that what this whole thing kind of started with? Or am I misremembering?
I think there's one of those. I would say on the secure side, I don't know. I think we've asked for some of the research, or asked for like where some of these come from. I think some of them came out of customer things, and some of them are just like potentials, but I don't think they're like research. I think it's potentially we heard from one customer. I was trying to look to see. I thought the issue description's been changed a few times. So I don't actually know if it has that in it anymore. But I don't know if like, and Andy has mentioned like, more research should be done. But I don't know what research has been done today on either one of these. I couldn't answer that.
So I know that secure, I know secure has a researcher. I assume compliance is under the same. I lose track of where everybody sits, but these should not make it into the product without being validated in some way, right? These are significant user-facing actions. And so my personal point of view would be they need to get it if they have a researcher, that researcher should be responsible for helping with solution validation. And I think we should feel free to sort of tell them to hold up on it until that's done, but that's just my researcher-centric point of view.
So for next steps, because I don't know what to do right now, could we ask for a breakdown of the actual problem proposal from both teams, I guess? I guess I'm only thinking of secure because I haven't looked at the compliance one since you pinged me yesterday. So I haven't focused that much on this because I have other things to do, and even responding takes so much time and reading all of the comments.
Yeah,
so
I think
a summary would be good.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I think that's been my concern too, is it feels like it does take so long to deal with this that like, feels like we need to have a stance on whether or not like, I agree with you. Like we need to figure out like how much involved do we want to be, and how much bandwidth do we have to like be that involved or not involved, and I think that falls a lot on, unfortunately, you and potentially Ben and myself, given Pedro's absence and Marcel's sort of also scope has like grown, and we don't have extra support out of him necessarily either.
Right.
I mean, maybe we can sort of like fling it back at them, like, you know, we can't like accept or spend bandwidth on this proposal until it's validated with users. And you're responsible for that because you're proposing this thing. I don't know.
Has this discussion helped at all with any of those questions that you posted?
Can you say that again?
Has this discussion helped in any way? Like, I feel like we still don't know what's going on. I still don't know what the next step is, and
it sounds like I think there's I think it's helped some. I think there's two things. I think one is in order for us to be able to support, I think like to both your and Ben's points, in order for us to be able to help support, one, it would be nice to sort of have the problems without solutions, but just the problems, and the research that like validated those problems, so that we can like process that, and then we would still expect you to like lead a solution, but we don't have enough context, I guess, to like understand where we're at is part of the issue, it feels like, in this. And so we need that from them. And then so I think the first step is like we can just ping all of these folks and ask for that. On the compliance side, that might be more challenging. What I asked for from compliance was I asked for, because they're already in dev, I asked for like a working prototype. So we could like review that functionality in terms of like, what does this look like in your prototype? And we'll see if we get anything back. I haven't seen any emails come back from them, actually. So yeah, I think that gives us a next, and I think for secure, I think for both, yes, it sounds like, I'll maybe project. It sounds like we're all concerned at varying levels. There's at least want to be more informed. Like we at least want to be more informed is maybe where I'll say that. And then and the place to start for us is like, can you help us with the research and like understanding on where we're at with these. That makes sense. And I'm
Yeah,
happy to like ask, or you can ask one way or the other.
ask what? Sorry, ping the two groups and ask for the problems.
Yeah.
Okay. The compliance one that's already in dev is to disable the merge button when status checks are required to pass and checks are failing or pending, right?
Yes.
So if that's already essentially happening, why would Secure just not use that as well? I'm not saying I particularly think that's a good idea. I don't know enough about it, but if it's already happening, then if I was on the Secure team, I would probably just be like, we'll do that too.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I want to make sure we have why I'd asked about like, do we need to address this like at a higher level, right? And I had sent the Secure team, we have in development docs, we have the concept of what we consider a merge check and what we consider approvals, right? We have the concept of checks being automated systems that users like don't interact with, and we have approvals, which are people click the approve button, and those are the two ways that like you can control merging. I think the external status check follows sort of the regular I would say it's equivalent to like all discussions are resolved, right? Those are checks. Like all threads must be resolved on a thing. I think it is similar. I think the question is going to be that UI and that experience is a little bit confusing because you're waiting on something to come back, which is I think different than any other status check we have today, where status checks today respond in real time and happen within our system, right? Like they're either threads are resolved, the pipeline must pass, the approvals are all given, there's no conflicts. Like there's things that you can deal with versus like a widget that says status checks one failed. I don't know what you do. Like how do you deal with that as a user, and like how do you communicate that like the reason you can't merge when pipeline, like you can't even click merge when pipeline succeeds, is this other thing is happening, and that's on them. But the question is like, if this is a thing that's in the product and we want Secure to leverage this, like how do we make sure that experience is like consistent and not like across every group that sort of like wants to do something similar? Like I think that's where I'm concerned. Like, compliance, I don't necessarily disagree with what they're doing. I think there's a potential for like a very weird state. I think how do we communicate that, and then how do we make sure other things like, no, this is how you deal with that as we move forward? And I think that takes us, like this is the unfortunate position of us being sort of central to the merge request, is like we are aware of like 5 different groups doing things, and they're sort of just focusing on their own thing.
Right. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see the prototype of compliance's implementation. We have, the merge widget, and there's a room underneath that gives you, the merge summary. This is going to be merged into this branch. The branch will be deleted, that kind of stuff. So that seems like the place to say, still waiting on this external service to do something and link to it. Because then the merge button is going to be disabled, and it's right below that, right? I think Camellia also posted a design that was kind of similar to that. That was like, you can't merge because of all of these reasons, or you can't approve. I forget what it was, but it seemed kind of similar. So if we see compliance, we can look at Secure One again and see. I don't remember which problem that was solving, so we still need to ask for the problem. But it did sound like they were kind of going in the same direction as each other, so that's useful. We already have a place for it. Not that I want to clog the merge widget, but we do have a place for text to go, at least. We're not just going to be adding banners and alerts everywhere.
If it helps, I can think of a relatively common merge request, at least for me, that gets stuck on waiting for something downstream. Review apps. Those hang on waiting for downstream pipeline, usually for about 15-20 minutes. I would love to know this sort of thing was happening.
With regards to this, sorry, I don't know, I didn't follow.
It's a real life example of something is happening elsewhere that is not really shown in the merge request itself.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, it sounds like it's a bigger problem, and we could potentially be saying more just in general about merge request statuses. And yeah.
Okay. Do you want to take, oh, Ben, you have a couple comments. I'll let you.
I saw that you responded to this already, but yeah, I mean, if there's a process in place for this, are they following that process? Or, you know, if that's insufficient, then yeah, I can, you know, we can contribute to that or think about it so that it's not causing us this kind of headache in the future. So.
Yeah, I think from your side, and it's been a while since this page was originally written. I'd love if you take a look and like think if there's ways to improve it. I will say that it has been not successful, I think, in driving what we would like to see. Historically, I think part of that is like it's a lofty ask. I think code review has I don't want to say a higher bar. I don't think that's fair. I think code review is in an interesting position where we feel the impact of inconsistent things and the user experience at a larger scale than most other teams, because other groups contribute sort of simultaneously to our area, whereas like you don't see that in issues, or you don't see that in other places, right? Like the MR is sort of where every group goes to contribute, and so we see this at a scale that like makes it so there's more information needed and more understanding needed on our side to know what's happening, because we're trying to coordinate our own group and potentially 2 or 3 other groups that are like trying to do very similar things. And so that's why I think the asks in this tend to be loftier, because if someone wants to add a new style check, like this external status check that could block an MR, like we want to know why, have a good reason. So when the next group comes along and says, we're going to do this, but slightly differently, we don't end up, in those states. And we want to make sure we have like answers for like, here's how you solve sort of similar sounding or similar feeling problems. And so, but that's a lot of effort to push off on other teams. It's a lot for them to also take on. And so I think that's why we've had a hard time getting people on board with this. So I think I would say from reviewing it, it would be helpful to know, like, are there ways we could make this easier, lower the barriers to like sort of increase the collaboration, but make sure that we're still trying to drive the right outcome, like a consistent outcome in a user experience.
Just out of curiosity, like, are you hearing from these teams when they're still like kind of early in this process, or are you hearing from them like well into their development?
I hear both. I don't know what Annabelle's experience is. I hear both. I also tend to like, because I subscribe to labels, which is like a bad habit, but I get notified if somebody labels a merge request with the merge request label, which often happens if they're touching the merge request. And so it's easier for me to like catch and go, something's happening in dev, whether or not we knew about it in advance. Now everyone knows that they're not gonna put the label on things. So that's one way. I think like compliance, I would say like with the external status checks, we started talking to them well before they took that on, like well before it became in engineering. Like we had conversations about it and walked through like some of the initial iterations. So that's happening. And I'd say in secure, this is the same thing. They're well before engineering effort right now, right? Like we're talking to designers. We're not talking to like engineers about what's going on. So I think we're ahead of implementation in most cases. But as we all know, like as you get closer and closer to implementation, things start to like shift from where you thought they were 6 months ago or, you know, a year ago. I think it's been a year plus since we talked to compliance about something.
Okay, maybe what I'll do in my copious amounts of spare time is write a document that proposes a new process that's a little bit more lightweight, and would act as maybe at least an iteration, if not a replacement for that page that you looked at, because I just looked at it and it's a little complex to follow. I think we can try to make that a little bit more understandable.
Awesome. Well, Annabelle, do you want to take the next steps on the secure side to follow up with them and ask about problems in research, and then I can ping Derek and Sam and see if we can figure out who the designer is in compliance and look at that too.
Sounds
And
good.
I'll take that side, and then we'll just sort of ask for more information about both and then go from there and try and that.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
And feel free to rope me in if that's like helpful. I will advocate for research.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Annabelle and Ben. I feel better than I did earlier and late last week about this. So like that's a step in the right direction.
Okay. All right, I
Enjoy
gotta
the rest
jump
of your
off. Yeah.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks for staying late.
Bye.